The wind had a bite that stung even through layers of wool, and the Alaskan coastline stretched cold and gray beneath a sky that never fully brightened. In 1895, the whaling ship Ada Marie pressed north, her timbers groaning as if they too feared what lay ahead. We left Dutch Harbor with the first ice already clinging stubbornly to the rails. Each flake a reminder that winter comes early in these waters. Men on deck moved with practiced routine, hauling lines, checking sails, preparing for the hunt. Yet something unspoken made even the hardest sailors glance more often toward the frozen horizon. I am Thomas Kearney, 26, a cooper by trade and a deckhand by circumstance. I learned quickly that in these seas, it is not the wind nor the cold you fear most, but what you cannot see. Captain Harlan Crowe stood at the helm, his eyes sharper than the knife he carried, beard-trimmed, posture rigid. Silas Murray, our first mate, kept meticulous records of every coil of rope and every pound of biscuit, his notebook a silent testament to order in a world of chaos. Jed Sutter, our harpooner, had hands scarred by years of line burn and a habit of speaking to his tools, as if the iron could answer. Wallace King, the cook, cursed the stove more than any man alive, and the two brothers from Seattle, Reed and Owen Mallory, carried the restless pride of youth, eager to prove themselves against the ice, the whales, and perhaps the cold itself. Then there was Nanuk. We took him on at St. Michael, a man of few words and measured movements. His English was spare, precise, landing clean like thrown knives. He knew the channels, the shoals, and the restless ice, and he warned the captain to avoid certain inlets once winter settled. The captain laughed at the caution, but in the weeks that followed, that laughter faded into silence. Nanuk did not join in the camaraderie of the mess. He watched, always watching, his gaze fixed on the shifting ice, his narrow face betraying nothing yet suggesting he had seen things no map could show. Our purpose was simple: hunt bowhead whales, cut blubber on the ice when conditions allowed, and fill the casks with oil. The Ada Marie carried 2 whaleboats slung on davits, stacked whalebone, extra spars, spare line, and rifles for bear, the latter more for insurance than plan. We pushed north as October bled into early winter, the rigging stiff, the deck slick under our feet, the cold climbing into bones no blanket could reach. The first whale we took fell under the edge of broken floes. The lookout sang out, the boats went down, and we moved in the practiced rhythm of men who had long danced with danger. I rowed in the starboard boat under Jed's command. The whale surfaced and sounded, the line screamed, and the boat lurched violently, throwing one man sideways. The pull was relentless, the lancing final, the sea darkened by blood. Back on the ice, we cut in the blubber, the knives moving constantly to keep our fingers from freezing. While the men labored, Nanuk stood apart, eyes fixed on the water beyond the flow. I called out to him once, asking what he saw. His answer was simple, measured, and yet it carried weight. Current changes, he said. Ordinary words, I thought. But the way he watched the sea suggested he saw more than ripples or drift ice. That night, as the men drank an extra mug of coffee in the mess, their voices loud with excitement, Nanuk remained near the forecastle, back against timber, eyes on the distant shoreline. I asked him why he did not drink. Too late for warm drink, he said. Sleep comes wrong. I did not understand, and I did not press. He had the patience of the ice itself. Later, as the ship moved north under slow sail, Owen Mallory asked what the shape had been that Jed glimpsed earlier along the shore. I had no answer. Nanuk, ever watchful, only said quietly, almost to himself, "Something moves. Not seal, not whale." The cold pressed against our bodies, the wind softened, and the Ada Marie floated through an empty, silent sea. Yet beneath the surface, something else moved. Something that did not belong. I felt it in the silence, in Nanuk's quiet vigilance, and in the subtle change of the ice around us. Cliffhanger. Nanuk's eyes stayed fixed on the dark water beyond the ice, unblinking. Whatever he saw, I knew it was not a trick of wind or wave. The morning light lay thin over the horizon, a pale wash against the endless stretch of ice and water. The Ada Marie creaked softly as she drifted north, the wind almost gone, leaving a silence that pressed against every man aboard. The cold seemed sharper in stillness, and even ordinary sounds. The slap of a small wave against the hull, the groan of a block felt amplified, like whispers in a great hall. We moved carefully along the deck, stamping our feet to chase away the creeping chill, eyes instinctively drawn to the ice that drifted in slow, ghostly currents. It was Owen Mallory who first saw it, a dark shape skimming across a distant patch of snow-laden ice. "Bear?" he asked, voice small, almost hoping it was nothing. Reed squinted, trying to catch a clearer view. "Could be a seal," he offered, though even he did not sound convinced. The shape was too large, too deliberate, and it moved with a speed that no ordinary animal should manage. Jed Sutter took the glass from the captain without waiting and trained it. On the distant movement, silent as the wind, Captain Crow leaned in beside him, face unreadable, hand resting near the knife at his belt. "Could be a wolf," Owen suggested again, eagerness mixed with fear. Nanuk's voice came quietly from behind, measured, calm, but carrying an unspoken weight. "No wolf there." He nodded once, sharp and certain. The men fell silent. Not one of us dared contradict him. Something in the way he scanned the shoreline suggested knowledge older than any chart or compass could give. The ice shifted, small ridges rising and breaking in patterns that seemed almost purposeful, as if the sea itself was signaling caution. Every instinct on board told us to pay attention, to watch, to respect what moved just beyond our understanding. The shape appeared again for a heartbeat. Glimpsed only for a moment, a dark, immense form slipping across broken ice, faster than any bear, smoother than any wolf. Then it vanished as if the ice had swallowed it whole. Murmurs ran quietly among the men, but no one laughed or tried to reassure anyone else. Even Silas Murray, careful and precise, could not hide the tension that crept into his posture. "Could be the wind, could be a trick of the ice," he muttered, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. I watched Nanuk, his gaze never leaving the shoreline. His hands rested lightly on the rail, fingers spread, calm as though he were expecting this. "It waits," he said softly, almost to himself. No one questioned him. The sense of unease deepened. Something in the air had changed. The ice and sea no longer seemed passive. They were alive in ways that felt deliberate, watching us back. As the afternoon wore on, the shape did not return, but its presence lingered in every shadow, every ripple, every quiet crack of ice. The crew tried to work, but hands shook slightly. Eyes darted repeatedly toward the distant shore, and every splash or distant cry of a gull set hearts hammering. Nanuk remained a silent sentinel, his attention never wavering. I began to understand that whatever we had glimpsed was patient, intelligent, and deliberate. Cliffhanger. When the sun sank low and the shadows lengthened, I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. A mass, dark and enormous, shifted in the ice beyond our sight. It watched, unseen yet present, and I knew, as Nanuk had already known, that we were no longer simply observers of the sea. Something was observing. By the time we had pushed further north, the ice was no longer a scattered nuisance, but a relentless wall closing around the Ada Marie. Thick floes pressed against the hull, groaning as if testing the ship's strength, and the open water we had relied on for maneuvering grew scarce. Every turn of the rudder seemed to meet resistance, and the wind dropped to a whisper, leaving a suffocating stillness over the deck. The men grew quieter, moving with careful deliberation, each step measured against the slick boards and treacherous ice patches. Isolation had a way of amplifying fear, and we could feel it in the way conversations dwindled to hushed murmurs. How even the laughter of Reed and Owen Mallory seemed forced. Night fell early in that latitude, bringing a darkness so thick it felt physical, pressing down on the ship like a weight. Owen and I were on watch, walking the deck in silence, stamping our feet against the cold, listening. That night, the air carried sounds that had no place in ordinary winter seas. Low rolling thumps came from beneath the ice, hollow and deliberate, followed by faint splashes that suggested size and intent. It was unlike anything we had encountered before. Owen whispered that it must be the ice settling, but even he could not hide the tremor in his voice. Nanuk moved along the deck as quietly as a shadow, his gaze fixed on the horizon, never speaking, never resting. He seemed attuned to every shift in the ice, every whisper in the wind. I watched him more than the ice that night, noticing how his stance held a calm authority, how his eyes flicked toward each sound before the rest of us even registered it. There was knowledge there, something deep and ancient, that made me both reassured and unsettled. He carried the weight of something we could not yet name, yet it was clear he expected danger, and we would be fools to ignore it. Below deck, the men tried to maintain their routines, checking lines, sharpening knives, preparing gear for the next whale hunt. But the isolation gnawed at focus. Tasks that should have been simple became heavier with the pressure of unknown eyes and unseen presence. Whispered speculations spread quietly from man to man. What could move beneath the ice? Could it be a bear, a whale, or something worse? Even Captain Crow, normally unshakable, cast frequent glances at the distant shoreline, frowning beneath his short-trimmed beard. Hours passed with little movement, then a sound cut sharply through the stillness. A splash, closer this time, heavier, deliberate, echoing against the ice like a signal. Owen froze, hand gripping mine, eyes wide in the lamplight of the deck. My own breath caught. We looked toward the sound, but the darkness had swallowed it, leaving only the memory of weight and presence. Nanuk had already positioned himself near the rail, scanning the horizon with the calm patience of a man who had known this moment was coming. The morning sun did little to warm the deck, and the ice around the Ada Marie had thickened into jagged ridges that scraped the hull with every subtle drift. We were scanning the horizon, eyes trained for whales, for bear, for any sign of ordinary life. But then something extraordinary happened. A dark shape broke the still water near the edge of a floe. It was massive, longer than any whale we had hunted, but it moved with a speed that was impossible, gliding over the broken ice as if the sea itself obeyed it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the murmurs began, hushed at first, growing in disbelief. "Whale?" Reed whispered, hope and fear tangled in his voice. "Impossible," Jed said, lowering the glass, tension stiff in his shoulders. Captain Crow stepped forward, voice firm, trying to assert reason. "It's just the ice. Or a whale trapped under the floes," he said, though the sharp edge in his tone betrayed doubt. Nanuk did not speak, but his eyes held a warning deeper than any words. He moved along the rail with quiet precision, positioning himself where he could observe the creature. Without drawing attention, hands resting lightly on the wood, calm but ready, I felt a chill run down my spine. The legends Nanuk had hinted at, stories of the Akhlut, a creature that haunted these northern waters, had always seemed distant, almost myth. Now in front of me, the stories clawed into reality. The dark shape shifted beneath the ice. A brief flash of a fin, a shadow moving with unnatural intent. It seemed to circle, calculating, deliberate, its presence demanding acknowledgement. The crew reacted in ways that revealed their fear. Reed and Owen whispered frantic guesses. Some shook their heads as if denying what they saw could make it vanish. Wallace King muttered curses, gripping the rail so tightly his knuckles whitened. Jed's eyes were fixed, glass lifted, muscles taut as though he might throw himself at it despite the impossibility. Even Captain Crow's attempts at rationality faltered as the creature surfaced for a moment, massive and dark before slipping beneath the ice like smoke swallowed by water. Nanuk's stillness contrasted sharply with the chaos of our reactions. He had known, perhaps, that this day would come, and though he did not speak, his calm presence grounded us. I found myself reflecting on the old legends, whispered in hushed tones by the few who had traveled these waters for generations, stories of hunters lost, of strange shapes under frozen seas, of intelligence and malice in forms that defied human understanding. The Akhlut was no myth tonight. It was here, tangible and terrifying, moving with a purpose we could barely comprehend. Then just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The water fell silent, ice shifted quietly, and only faint ripples remained to mark where it had been. Yet the signs in the ice, the grooves and the displaced flows, suggested immense weight, deliberate motion, and an awareness that unsettled the mind. The men exchanged glances that needed no words, each understanding that something had passed that was neither whale nor bear, neither predator nor prey, but something altogether different. Cliffhanger. We waited, holding our breath, scanning the silent waters. The creature had vanished, but its presence lingered, echoing in every crack of ice, in every shadow, and deep down I knew it had not left us completely. The morning was pale and brittle, the sun barely lifting above the low horizon. The Ada Marie lay stalled among fractured floes, the air sharp with cold that bit through mittens and wool. We were cutting in a whale we had hauled from a nearby patch of broken ice, the slab groaning under our weight as if warning us to move carefully. Knives flashed, hands worked tirelessly, the familiar rhythm of labor keeping us focused. But something in the ice beyond our immediate work drew my eyes. There were grooves, long, deep, and deliberate. Snow had been pushed aside in ways that no bear, no human, no whale could make. The ice itself seemed marked by immense weight, and the broken edges suggested movement far larger than any whale carcass we had dragged to the floe. Owen noticed first, stepping back, his knife hovering uncertainly over the blubber. Did something walk here?" he asked quietly, voice trembling. I didn't answer at first, only followed the lines etched into the ice. They were fresh, and they trailed closer to where we labored. Panic was a slow, creeping thing. The men began to glance nervously toward the shoreline, toward the water, toward every shadow that could conceal the unknown. Reed whispered about bears, about ice shifts, about the wind playing tricks, but no explanation satisfied the gut-deep unease that had settled over the crew. Nanuk remained calm, silent as always, moving along the edge of the floe with careful steps, subtly guiding our positioning. He shifted us away from the grooves, away from spots where the ice might betray the weight of what had passed, never speaking a word about the danger, yet making sure none of us ignored it. The air felt heavier, as though the creature had left a presence that lingered like fog. Every sound, the crack of ice beneath our boots, the slap of the whale's carcass against the floe, the soft rush of distant water, felt magnified. Jed and Silas moved with extra caution, muscles tight, eyes darting. Even Captain Crow, whose voice had once commanded unquestioned authority, kept a quiet vigilance, scanning the surroundings more often than issuing orders. The tension between belief and denial twisted in the air. Some men refused to acknowledge the truth. Others trembled in silent acknowledgement. I felt the weight of being hunted for the first time. Not by a bear, not by a rival ship, not by the sea itself, but by something unseen, intelligent, deliberate. It was close, too close. Then the water answered with a sudden, violent splash just beyond the edge of the floe. Ice shifted violently, and a shiver ran through every plank of the ship and every bone in my body. The sound was deliberate, full of intent, and impossible to ignore. Cliffhanger. Something massive circled nearby, invisible but present. The Ave Marie was no longer alone, and the sea around us was not empty. Whatever we had glimpsed before was here again, closer, patient, and watching. The Ave Marie floated in silence, but the quiet was no longer comforting. The men moved about the deck with stiff shoulders and clipped words, each glance carrying suspicion, each cough or shuffle drawing nervous attention. Conversations that once flowed easily now snapped short, replaced by muttered warnings or frantic speculations. Reed and Owen whispered about what they had seen, their words overlapping in fear, while others claimed the ice played tricks, that shadows shifted too easily, that the wind carried voices where none should be. Superstitions took root quickly, spreading among men who had once scoffed at old legends. Paranoia settled in like frost. Every splash, every crack in the ice, every distant call of a gull seemed loaded with intention. Jed moved with tighter precision, checking the ropes and lines with a suspicion that any loosened knot could mean disaster. Silas's careful notes now included wary observations of movements on the ice and in the water, his pencil scratching long lines of unease across the pages. Even Captain Crow, usually unshakable, paused often, scanning the horizon, hands resting uneasily on the rail as though ready for immediate action. The ice around the ship thickened, crushing the Ave Marie into a slow, helpless drift. Movement was restricted, and retreat became a problem of logistics as well as fear. Arguments began to rise in volume. "We can't keep heading north," one man said, voice trembling with a mix of reason and dread. "We have to turn back before what?" Another shot back. Before it finds us again? The tension twisted tighter with every passing moment. Nanuk stood silently as always near the rail, eyes sweeping the ice with measured attention. His calm presence was the only anchor in the growing storm of uncertainty. Yet his silence spoke volumes, a quiet warning that no man dared interpret fully. I watched my fellow sailors with growing unease. Faces once familiar now seemed altered, taut with fear. Flickers of doubt flashing behind eyes that had known only the rhythm of work and ice. A sense of inevitability hung over the deck, that the unseen observer we had glimpsed before, the massive, dark shape that had haunted the ice, was patient and deliberate. It had learned, it had waited, and it had chosen to make itself known in ways subtle enough to twist the mind. Then, in the dim light of an early twilight, a sudden commotion broke the tense quiet. One of the men, a deckhand who had kept to himself, vanished from the rail while adjusting a line. A shout rose, voices called out his name. Boots pounded across the deck, and moments later he reappeared. But he was different. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and his movement stiff, as if he carried an invisible weight. He did not speak. He did not meet anyone's gaze. The air seemed to thicken with his presence, and a cold dread passed through everyone who had seen him return. Cliffhanger. Something had touched him, or seen him, or marked him in ways none of us understood. The ship drifted in the tightening grip of ice, and the unseen watcher remained patient, deliberate, circling ever closer. The morning began with the usual preparations for the hunt. But the air carried a tension sharper than any previous day. The ice shifted in odd patterns, ridges snapping and collapsing under unseen weight, and even Jed's practiced hands moved more cautiously, reading the subtle distortions in the flows. We lowered the whale boats into the narrow channels, expecting routine struggle and skill. But the rhythm of the hunt faltered almost immediately. The water seemed to push back, currents shifting with unnatural precision, guiding our small boats as if a hidden hand directed them. I felt it first as a brush against intuition, a sense that we were no longer alone in the hunt. Grooves in the ice, deeper and fresher than before, appeared ahead of our path. Each movement of the whale seemed anticipated. Each splash echoed with an unseen counterpoint. Jed shouted as the line suddenly jerked. Not from the whale, but from something beneath the surface. The boat rocked violently. A coil of rope snapped, whipping like a serpent across the deck. Reed and Owen tumbled to the ice, their cries swallowed by the sudden roar of the wind and splintering floes. Panic rippled quickly through the men as the first real danger became undeniable. Captain Crow barked orders, trying to maintain control, but even he could not deny the chaos that the ice and water now orchestrated. Nanuk moved with precision, guiding men away from the most treacherous patches, repositioning lines, and whispering instructions just loud enough for those nearest to hear. He did not explain. He did not warn in words we could grasp. He acted, and in his actions we understood. The threat was intelligent, deliberate, and fully aware of our movements. Shouts rang across the ice as a boat overturned, water flooding the flow, men scrambling to stay upright. Jed's face was pale, muscles taut as he wrestled the line free from some unseen obstruction. Screams cut the cold air, brief and sharp, as men narrowly avoided being dragged into the freezing water. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, watching the chaos unfold, feeling the weight of helplessness, the fragility of life in the grip of a creature both immense and cunning. The hunt ground to a halt. Silence returned to the channel, but it was a false calm. We realized finally that we were not hunting whales alone. Something beneath the ice, something we could not name, had been observing, anticipating, and now had made its presence known in the most dangerous way. Nanuk remained calm amid the panic, his steady hands and silent judgment keeping us tethered to reason, even as fear clawed at our minds. Then, just as suddenly as it had attacked, the creature vanished. No splash, no ripple, no sign that it had ever been there, save for the overturned boat, the snapped lines and the icy scars etched into the flows. Its absence left a void that felt heavier than its presence, an emptiness that pressed against the chest and whispered of patience, intelligence, and malice beyond comprehension. Cliffhanger. We stared at the water, waiting, breath caught in frozen throats. The Akhlut was gone, but it had not left. It lingered beneath the ice, watching, waiting, calculating. And we knew that the next encounter would be far deadlier. Part 8. Desperate Measures. The ice had grown merciless. Thick sheets pressed against the Ada Marie, groaning and shifting with a sound like distant thunder. Every attempt to navigate northward became a struggle. The ship trapped in channels that opened and closed with terrifying unpredictability. Panic threaded through the men, subtle at first, then growing louder as hours passed with no clear path forward. Hands shook on lines, voices snapped in frustration, and even the most experienced sailors faltered under the weight of uncertainty. Exhaustion mingled with fear and morale began to crumble. We devised strategies to escape the tightening grip of the flows, shifting weight, adjusting sails, levering blocks, even attempting small breaches through the ice. Each effort brought only temporary relief. The ship immediately hemmed in again by new formations. Every sound, ice cracking, water rushing beneath flows. Faint splashes felt magnified, as if announcing our vulnerability. I watched men we had relied upon falter, their confidence dissolving into muttered prayers and whispered curses. The cold pressed harder now, not just on bodies but on spirit, leaving an ache of helplessness that no blanket or mug of coffee could chase away. Nanuk moved among us like a quiet anchor. He gave instructions with a calm certainty that seemed almost impossible given the chaos, directing the placement of boats, advising on ice edges to avoid, and timing our pushes with the subtle shifts in the flows. His knowledge of the Akhlut, unspoken but palpable, guided every maneuver. We followed him instinctively, trusting in the wisdom carried silently in his measured steps. I realized then that his presence was more than guidance. It was the only thing standing, between survival and disaster. As I stood on deck, watching the men strain against the ice and the wind, I reflected on how fragile we were, not just against the cold or the ocean, but against the myths that had once seemed distant stories. Nature was patient, relentless, and terrifying. The Akhlut, hidden beneath the ice, embodied both the myth and the reality of human vulnerability. Our small vessel and our limited skills were no match for something that knew the land, the ice, and the depths as well as we knew our knives. Then, without warning, a splash shattered the tense stillness. Water erupted near the port side, huge and violent, sending sprays of icy mist over the deck. Men shouted, scrambling to balance themselves as the Ada Marie rocked violently. The creature had surfaced, appearing suddenly, its immense bulk cutting through the ice with deliberate intent, its dark presence looming closer to the ship than ever before. Fear surged anew, a cold, sharp panic that left no room for thought. Only instinct, only survival. Cliffhanger. The Akhlut circled, massive and intelligent, sizing us up as much as we were sizing it. Our desperate measures were not enough. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at sails and freezing the breath in our lungs as the Ada Marie groaned against the jagged ice. The Akhlut circled, enormous dark curves slipping beneath, the surface and surfacing with terrifying purpose, every movement deliberate, every ripple in the water announcing its presence. Men shouted, some in terror, some in instinctive defiance, but the sound seemed swallowed by the ice and wind. I gripped the rail, eyes wide, feeling the cold deep in my bones, yet the fear was sharper, deeper, impossible to shake. From my position, I could see it clearly now, a shadowed mass moving with intelligence, not blind animal instinct. Its head rose briefly, dark eyes gleaming with uncanny awareness, and I realized the stories Nanuk had hinted at were not exaggerations. Jed screamed as the creature lunged near a whaleboat, the line snapping under impossible tension, throwing the men violently aside. Reed and Owen tumbled onto the ice, scrambling to regain footing, faces white with terror, voices barely audible above the roar of ice cracking and water splashing. One crew member went under briefly, then resurfaced, coughing and shivering, forever changed. Nanuk's calm was the only anchor. He moved with precision, signaling silent commands, guiding us through the chaos. He repositioned the boats, adjusting our angles, predicting where the creature would strike next. We followed instinctively, trusting him more than reason itself, knowing that any hesitation could be fatal. Ice shifted treacherously beneath our feet, groaning and splitting as if the sea itself were conspiring with the Akhlut, and the cold spray bit at every exposed inch of skin. The confrontation escalated. Splintered ice, violent waves, and the screams of men intermingled as the Akhlut struck again and again, testing, circling, sizing up its prey. Captain Crow shouted orders, trying to maintain some semblance of control, but the power of the creature and the merciless conditions quickly overpowered human will. Men moved with courage, some with cunning, others with panicked error. Every second stretched into eternity, every splash and crash magnified in a symphony of terror. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the Akhlut vanished beneath the ice. Silence fell, broken only by the groan of stressed timbers and the shivering breaths of the surviving crew. The Ada Marie was damaged, scratches along the hull, broken lines, splintered ice in the channels, and the men were shaken, some injured, all changed. Fear lingered like smoke in our lungs, thick and unrelenting. We had survived, but survival felt hollow, as if the encounter had left a part of us behind in the dark, frozen waters. Cliffhanger. The Akhlut was gone for now, but the ice held its secrets, and we knew it was only a matter of time before the unseen intelligence beneath the waves tested us again. The northern waters were no longer a place for men alone. The morning sun rose weak and pale over a fractured sea. The Ada Marie floated among jagged floes, her hull scarred, her timbers groaning from the night's terror. The crew moved quietly, assessing damage, counting losses, and tending to the injured. Silence hung heavier than the wind. Even the gulls seemed hesitant to call. Fear had drained energy from every man, leaving behind a raw awareness of our vulnerability and the immense, indifferent power of the North. I walked the deck slowly, noting every line broken, every splintered rail, every mark left on the ice that could only have been made by the Akhlut. The creature had vanished, but its presence lingered in every shadow, every groove, every ripple. I thought of Nanuk, who had guided us through danger with quiet certainty. His knowledge of the ice, the channels, and the unseen intelligence beneath the waves proving invaluable. Words could not convey the depth of his foresight, the calm authority that had kept us alive when all else failed. We spoke little, the usual clamor of men replaced by whispered recollections of what had passed. Some shook their heads, unable to reconcile what they had witnessed with what they had believed possible. Legends had become reality. Myth had stepped out of the shadows and into the frozen waters. I could feel the awe and fear intertwined in every gaze. The humility that comes when human pride meets forces beyond understanding. The ocean, the ice, and the creature had reminded us that we were small, fleeting and fragile, even now as we repaired lines, tended to injuries, and tried to regain some semblance of order. I felt eyes watching from beneath the ice. The Akhlut's absence did not mean safety, only patience. Its intelligence, its patience, its relentless presence had left an imprint deeper than scars on wood or flesh. I knew we would carry it with us in memory and instinct, and in the cold awareness that some forces cannot be tamed or outwitted. And yet, despite the terror, there was something awe-inspiring about having glimpsed it, something that made me recognize the boundaries of human strength and the vast, unknowable mysteries of the northern seas. We survived, but survival had come at a cost that words could not measure. Final line, lingering tension. The Akhlut had vanished beneath the ice, but as I stared at the shifting floes, I could not shake the thought that it was still there, waiting, patient and watching.